Today I want to talk to you about the prime way that you can look at health and sexuality, to see that through type itself. And it's very important to understand that by following your strategy, what I'm going to describe to you is going to lead directly, in other words, it's going to manifest directly as those things operating correctly. Type is something that's extraordinary. Remember that type is a very complex thing because it's built out of all the activations in a chart, and only when all of the definition is there is it possible to see what the type actually is. That these four types, with the subgroup of the manifesting generator making it fit 5 different variations, those variations are primary. So far, all this week, every other half hour I'm telling you nothing works unless you're living out your strategy. At the deepest level, living out your strategy in terms of living out your type, what we're going to look at this morning, this is what comes out directly from that, in terms of your well-being, in terms of intimacy in your life, in terms of connecting to others. Manifestors. Manifestors only represent 8% of the population. Yet manifestors have been in charge, and have been in charge from the beginning of what we call civilization. They were in charge long before that. Manifestors were in charge because manifestors appeared to be the true alphas. They appeared to be the true alphas because they were the only type that could actually just do. They could be the sole hunter going out for the kill. They could go out and get things done, and they could get things done without relying or being dependent on others. They appeared to be superior. And because they appeared to be superior and because they were in charge, they wrote the rules. Now, I'm a manifestor, so don't blame me. However, they wrote the rules. And because they wrote the rules, they made all the other types suffer the consequences of manifestor rules. Manifestors said that it's up to you. And of course, all the other types, that's not true. So manifestors started the whole business. They got everything going. They turned all the generators into slaves. That's why it's a manifestor that's got to free them. They turned all the generators into slaves, and they stuffed the projectors down at the bottom because they knew somewhere that the projectors were supposed to be on top. So for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the manifestors have ruled. For most of human history, there was very little health care because manifestors ruled. If you go to a doctor's office and you look at their files, you're not going to find very many manifestors. They don't go to doctors. They don't look for help. So they didn't care about everybody else. And you see, manifestors wrote the rules about sex, and manifestors are the great rapists. I mean, after all, it's the manifestor that was the ultimate caveman. I want it, I'm going to have it, and I'm going to hit it. Period. And I'm going to hit it because I don't want to have any resistance. See, manifestors wrote the game. And everybody else has suffered because of that. And the ways in which we look at things has been distorted. There was a great culture on the other side of the Mediterranean, Carthaginian culture. It was great culture. And they went to war with the Italians. They went to war with an empire that was greater than them and eventually would lose. They fought 3 great wars, historic wars, Punic wars. And when it was over, their civilization was destroyed. And the land was seeded with salt, and the history was erased. And the only history that we have of those people was written by their conquerors. Now look, that's like Hitler writing the history of the Jews. It's not going to work in anybody's favor. Manifestors have written our history. Manifestors have created our basic philosophies. Manifestors have defined the nature of our sexuality. Manifestors have said what it is to be a man. All of that stuff. Manifestors. And they're a minority. And it's no problem to understand then why manifestors meet more resistance than any other type, and why manifestors are always making non-manifestors nervous and uncomfortable. Because the non-manifestor does not trust them for a moment, and it's in the genes, and it goes back forever. Everything about health, sexuality, all of these things begins when you're a child. Whenever I look at somebody's design, I always think about the child first. If you think about the child first, you can get to see what the wounds are, what the conditioning is. The manifestor child has a capacity to be able to act and to be able to act without needing the other. Because of that, the moment they come into the world, they have parents that are paranoid about them. Parents that are concerned that they need to be controlled. These are children that generally get punished, and if not punished physically, restricted. In other words, that the parents are afraid that they cannot control these children. The result in the children themselves is that, of course, this builds what is the theme of the manifestor, which is anger. Anger that they're not able to be able to go out and play because they're told they can't. Yet they know that they can. I mean, they know that it's possible. And the manifestor child is always dealing with restriction and restraint, and this builds up, it builds up their anger. Now, if you're going to raise a manifestor child, the most important thing is to teach them politeness. It's very important for manifestor children to recognize that the only way they're going to be able to do what they can do is that they have to ask permission when they're children because they're in the hierarchy and they're not at the top. And that they have to learn to recognize that as long as they can ask permission, if they're not unreasonably denied, they're going to be healthy people. However, they're not. Rarely is that the case. Rarely do they have that kind of positive conditioning. Most of the time, it's simply restriction. Now think about what happens to the manifestor child. The manifestor child gets to a point where they don't want to ask anything. They don't want to ask for anything because they don't want to be told no. They don't want to be restricted. They don't want to feel that anger again, so they stop asking. And when they stop asking, they start cheating. They don't want to ask if they can go out. They sneak out their bedroom window. They don't want to ask if it's okay to stay late after school. They simply do. And then they deal with the punishment that comes to them later. Now that leads to something else. If they get sick, they don't tell anybody either. In other words, they stop looking for allies in life very, very early and feel very much alone. Now the whole thing to understand about the health and well-being of a manifestor is that you don't see manifestors going for help. You don't see them going to the doctor when they have a problem. You don't see them until they're deathly ill. Only then do you actually get to see them. And that means that they're not going to be looking for psychological counseling, and they're not going to be looking for sexual therapy, and they're not going to be looking for health care, and they don't give a damn if it's holistic or not. The whole thing makes them angry that they would need somebody to help them in the first place. These are people that drop dead all the time. They literally explode. You see, all that anger is inside of them. And that anger either explodes as their physical system exploding, or explodes in violence or aggression. My favorite image of the sick manifestor is the manifestor with a heart attack on the street yelling at people. Lying there dying and screaming at them. Leave me alone! I'm all right! Whoosh, gone. That's the manifestor. Somebody comes to help them, they go away! Dead. So, if you have a manifestor child, if you don't teach them that they need help, everyone does, that they need to ask for help, and that if they ask for help and it's reasonable, that it will be answered, hopefully, for them in their conditioning, then they will be the kind of beings that can get to the point where they can ask for help. I mean, I am a pure manifestor, non-emotional. I will go to death's door before I look for somebody to help me. You know, the hardest thing in the world for me to do is ask anybody for anything. It makes me angry, just the idea of it. And I'm a manifester. What to do? That's the way I came into the world. So the manifester carries all of this built-in anger, and of course, this is what can kill them. I mean, manifestors are what they called A-types. You know, people that can just explode and die. That's them. You know, it just rages out of their bodies. Every type gets conditioned by the presence of a defined solar plex center. And whenever you see a defined solar plex center, it always adds its authority to the strategy automatically. And the authority that the emotional system always adds is that the authority is you've got to wait, you've got to sleep on it, you've got to give things time in order to be able to have additional perspective, in order to be able to move through the wave. I want to reiterate something about the nature of the solar plex center. The solar plex is an incredible thing. And yet throughout our history, we have only experienced it as a motor. That means that through the solar plex center, we never achieve awareness, at least not now the way we are. It means that the best that we can do is find clarity. Clarity is not truth. Clarity is not an absolute. And clarity is not derived from awareness. Clarity is directly derived from time, and only time. Recognize something about the emotional being. The emotional being is operating in a wave. And the thing to recognize is that at every given moment, that wave continues to move. And that in each place in that wave where they experience anything, that the next moment, the actual sense of that experience can change. For an emotional being to make a decision in the moment is reckless. It's reckless because that decision cannot be clear in that moment. It is guided by the very power of the solar plex, which blinds us, which overwhelms us, which has incredible capacity to drive us. You know, the great teaching to any emotional being is patience. And that with patience comes clarity. So think about the emotional manifester. The emotional manifester is in love. They want to have that person that they're in love with. And they wake up in the morning and they're high as a kite. And while they're high as a kite and feeling wonderful and the world is wonderful, they fall in love. They cannot then go and inform that person. Oh, you're great. I would love to. Blah, blah, blah. Now, it may work. After all, the emotional being that's high on their wave, if you're open to that, boy, do you go high. You get way, way, way up there in the clouds. This one really wants me. This one really loves me. The next morning, as the wave has moved, all of a sudden everything's different. And think about that person you meet as an emotional manifester and you're in the low end of your wave. And everything's ugly. Everything. Life is ugly. People are ugly. Everything's ugly. Your dog's ugly. It's all ugly. And there you meet somebody. It's all geometry after all. No choice. And there's that person who could be that person that would be wonderful for you. And in that moment, emotionally, you cut them off. Everything about being an emotional being is about taking in experience and watching. That's all. Taking it in and watching. As you go through time, clarity emerges on its own. So the emotional manifester, when they think they want to inform somebody, has to sleep on it before they actually do. Yes, it's an additional time frame, but that is not a punishment for being emotional. It's not a punishment that you've got to wait. It's an advantage. More than that, it adds to your profundity. You see, we have all this false sense of what's best, what's better, in our comparative trip. I'm a splenic being. When I meet you, the first time I meet you, the first second that I meet you, the first nanosecond that I meet you. That's my impression for life. That's it. I'm a pure splenic being. That's it. I take you in that moment, and that's it. And you can end up being my enemy, you can end up being my lover, you can end up being my friend. It doesn't make any difference, but you're always going to be in from the moment that I take you in that way and accept you. And it's in the moment, and I don't know what it means, and I don't know people very well because of that. I don't. I mean, I'm not talking about human design. I'm just talking about my interaction with human beings. But the emotional person, if I have an emotional friend in my life, that emotional friend knows me so deeply, and I only know them at the surface. You see, it's just different ways of processing consciousness. The emotional being processes through depth. The depth is layer after layer after layer of perspective. When I want to know about people, I ask an emotional person. They can tell me. They know that person when they're up. They know that person when they're down. They've seen that person react to the up and the down and the in and the out and the over and the under, and they're marvelous at being able to tell me about that person. If I ask a splenic person, you know what they say? Oh, they're all right. Or, no, they're not. And that's it. The emotional person will tell you 37 stories. Will show you how they went through this and that. And you see, I look at that and I say, wow, they really know these people. So when the emotional person tries to be like me and tries to make up their mind about somebody in the moment, they're giving up their own beauty, they're giving up their own magic, they're giving up their own clarity, they're giving up their own profundity. It's not a punishment to wait. It's not. We can't have a world filled with, oh, they're all right. No, they're not. We need to know about each other. We need to learn about each other. We need to come to grips with what it is to be human. Emotional people will tell us that if they wait. Because then when they tell us, they're clear. When they tell us and they're just up, psh. When they tell us when they're just down, psh. But when they're clear, they can really tell us something. That's what it's all about. The manifester actually has two strategies in their life. They have a strategy as long as anyone has authority over them. That is the strategy of the manifester child. And the strategy of the manifester child is to ask permission. That is, this is the only way that the manifester child has a chance, is if they can learn to ask permission. It's very good training for them, and it also gives them that opportunity to be able to get their energy out. And of course, what I tell parents of manifestor children is that in teaching them to ask permission, you cannot unreasonably deny them. If your 8-year-old says to you that he wants to smoke crack cocaine, you can unreasonably deny them. You can say, no. But I mean, if they want to go out and ride their bicycle, and you just say no because it's no, that's something that kills them. It creates all this deep anger inside of them. So if they ask permission, they have to be reasonably denied, not unreasonably denied. But the moment that the manifester stops being the child, that is the moment it leaves its parents' home, that's the moment that the strategy of the manifester moves from permission. They will not ask anyone permission once they're in charge of their own life. Ever again. They won't. And the moment that they become in charge of their own life, that's the moment that they must inform. Now what that means is that manifestors by their very nature have to be conditioned to realize that words and communication are the very, very important thing to them, because it is the way in which they can reach out to others. Because the manifestor cannot do anything other than inform, otherwise things don't work. Think about sexuality. The manifestor simply does, by its design, what it can do. Now, if the manifestor simply goes up to somebody that they're attracted to and grabs them, that person is not going to be excited by that. They're not going to like it, even if they were attracted to the person. Because there's something inside of them that will bring a great deal of fear in that moment and resistance in that moment. Because the manifestor has not considered them at all. And at the deepest level, anybody that gets touched by a manifester in that way, at the deepest level, what they're saying is, oh boy, look out. I'm defenseless here. I have no control here. If the manifester is interested in somebody and wants somebody, they have to tell them. And they have to tell them at a distance, with a certain aura space in between. They have to tell them first. They have to inform them first. Now think of the psychological dilemma sexually for the manifester. They're always the one that has to say it first. They're always the one that has to inform the other. Now, of course, that leads to all kinds of difficulties depending on your profile. Some people are very insecure. Some people are very paranoid. Some people it's easy, they're friendly. It is going to be a variation depending on the profile. But the manifester is always in that role. They do not know. And here you can see under manifester, will I be answered? The manifester goes up to somebody and says, I'm really interested in you, you're this or that, or whatever the case may be. They really don't know what's going to come out of that. They don't. They have no idea. And they're always putting themselves in that position of being rejected. And if you reject a manifester, they get angry. So the manifester is really attracted to you, comes up to you and says, I'm really interested in you. And the person says, sorry, I'm not in you. And they go nuts. They get really angry. And then they say, I'm never going to do that again. Next time I'm just going to take them. So the manifester has a difficult time sexually. They have a difficult time. Imagine the manifester teenager. How difficult that is. That they can't be the one that somebody else takes. If you're a manifester and somebody takes you, it'll never work. It'll never, ever work. Some projector slides up your leg and says, let me have this manifesting energy. It'll never work. It has to come from the manifester. That's what manifestors are about. It's the manifester that has to make it happen, and therefore the manifester has all the pressure. It's in the stereotypes that we live with, gender-wise. In that sense, it's much easier for the manifester male, because it fits into the archetype. The male has to be forward and come forward and say, look, I'm interested in you. It's difficult for the manifesting female. It's difficult for them. Because, of course, they have to be the one that initiates it. They have to be the one that exposes their vulnerability. Manifestors don't like to do that. But yet, when it comes to love, when it comes to sex, it's hard to avoid it. So once you can recognize as a manifestor, remember this is a minority, it's only 8% of the population. Once manifestors can understand there is no other way for them to find the right sexuality in their life, they must inform. If you're a manifestor and you're interested in somebody, tell them. Tell them. And if they're not interested in you, what to do? But it's the only way it's going to work, and it's the only way that they're going to allow you to get close enough to them. Because you see, until the manifestor can show the other types that they truly are concerned for their well-being, and that's what informing is. I'm informing you beforehand so you don't have to be nervous about me. I'm informing you beforehand so if I put my hand on you, you don't jump. I'm informing you beforehand. And the moment that the manifestor can do that, they eliminate the resistance field. It does not mean everybody says yes. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. But what it does mean for the manifestor is that they can live cleanly. And when the adult manifestor informs, it means that they're going to be healthier beings. They're not going to have this level of anger inside of their body that slowly eats them up and kills them. They won't. And they're not going to be in situations in which their sexual life and their intimacy does not work for them. And this is so common amongst manifestors, that it does not work for them, because they have not learned how important it is for them to follow their strategy. The manifestor that informs becomes a healthy being. And the manifestor that informs can be clear in its relationships. Manifestors forever run out of relationships. They just run away. They can, after all. They can open the door with their bag packed and go. But if they would inform before they would leave, they may not leave at all. You see, this is something that the manifestor has to grasp. And that the only way it works is that you've got to follow your strategy. You follow the strategy of informing. It's going to change your life. This is the thing that's so amazing about type. It changes your life by giving you your life and getting rid of the not-self. It eliminates the conditioning. It's gone. It's gone. And it's a simple thing. Manifestors don't tell you when they're sick. Projectors don't know when they're sick. Hospitals are filled with generators. Generators is 70% of the population. Generators represent the vast majority of physical problems on the planet. Most of the health issues that we have could be resolved if generators started to respond. The fact is that most of the illness in the world and most of the disease in the world is in generators. And that they have been operating not according to their nature for all of our recorded history and before that. Generators have never been operating properly. Their energy has never been used properly. And as a result, human beings are frail, open to disease, and that genetically generators have, continued that process by moving it from one generation to the next. And generators have been kept ill by manifestor propaganda. Think about that. It's been to the advantage of manifestors historically to keep generators as slaves, which means that they don't and did not get, for most of history, the same benefits. And we're not protected. When we deal with sexuality, if we take away the generators, there's no sexuality. They are sexuality. They are the embodiment of sexuality. They carry within them the reproductive and regenerative core of all life. I'm a great fan of generators, They are something unique, and when you think that they are 70% of us, that's over 4 billion people on this planet are generators, that waking them up is really a revolution. It's really a revolution. It is a revolution in terms of the spirit of humanity, and it is a revolution in terms of the well-being and the health of humanity. It starts with understanding that the generator is the most seduced by the manifestor because they share being energy types. They have this power inside of them. And yet the generator is not a manifestor. That the manifesting generator is not a manifestor. That the pure generator is not a manifestor. They are not. They're generators. And when you begin to understand that the generator in a pure state lives no choice, lives surrender, is the most spiritual being on the planet when they live their nature. That's why I've known from the beginning that this planet was designed to wake up. From the moment I was given this knowledge, it was obvious to me this planet can actually wake up. Oh, not the manifestors, they're dumb. Not the projectors, they've been too dependent too long. But the generators, they are the source of all power. And instead of being slaves, it's time for them to be builders. And it's so simple. It's so simple. Stop initiating. It is the manifestor that must initiate. They have no other way. They have to initiate love. They have to initiate their career. They have to initiate friendship. They have to initiate everything by informing. But the generator cannot initiate. It is not what it's here for. And every time a generator initiates, they carve something out of themselves that is irreplaceable. And slowly they kill themselves. They die of frustration. That's not what it's about. They're here to respond. And you see, they think responding is something they're waiting for. It's not true. Generators are responding all the time. All the time, every second, every moment. They're always responding. That's what they do. All they have to do is stop initiating. Take it from a manifester. The time of manifesting propaganda is over. It does not mean you're weak because you do not initiate. It does not mean that you are less advantaged if you do not initiate. That's just propaganda. It's not true. The manifester lives in the illusion of initiation. It's just an illusion. I'm not in charge of initiating. There's all kinds of people here who are generators who would love me to come up to them and inform them so they could tell me what they would love to tell me. I'm not in charge of that. I'm well aware of all that. But I don't run my life. I don't say in my mind, well, I should really talk to that generator because otherwise they're going to feel like I don't care and they won't be able to get to say what they want to say. That's not how it works. I have no choice. I inform who I inform if I inform them what to do. I'm not in charge of that. It's all an illusion. Generators have to know that they are the core of our spirituality. That's why this is a hellish place, ruled by manifester dogma. All these religions and their crap. All of that is to keep generators in their place. Because they're all afraid of the revolution. All the generator has to do is realize that in response, everything works for them. Everything. Their aura calls it all the time. I have a totally undefined sacral center. I walk by a sacral, it's like, it calls, it pulls you. The moment that the generator lives in response, that it gives up initiating, everything changes for it because they have the most radical change of all. They can completely dissolve the not-self in a moment. There is not a single generator that knows before they meet this knowledge who they are at any level. They don't. They don't until they have been asked at every level. And out of their response, they can know what is true for them, what is right for them, what is real for them. They can't initiate that. Generators are running around initiating. I believe this, I think that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm going there, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, blah, blah, blah. It's not true. The truth comes out of their response. I have a funny experience in my years of being a teacher of human design is that people would like to call me master. Aside from other things they'd like to call me. And there's always been a part of me that has never liked that. Never liked it at all. As a matter of fact, the only term I like is messenger. But that's because I'm a manifester. See, manifestors are not here to be masters. The only type that is here to be a master are the generators. Generators are designed for mastery. They are designed for it. And they are designed for mastery, but they are designed for mastery through the mechanism of the generator, which means that mastery is something that comes only with time. The theme of the generator is frustration. And it's that theme because the generator is a motor, but it's only a motor. It doesn't turn the motor on or whatever. It's just a motor, it's a limitation. And yet at the same time, it's always waiting for metamorphosis. It's always waiting for that connection to the throat for that metamorphic change. That the generator has to go through stages and stages and stages. And they can only do that, remember they're the great quitters, they can only do that if they've entered into it correctly and they are fulfilled in using their energy. Slowly then, they will go from stage to stage to stage until they finally reach a point of mastery. Now think about what that means for the generator sexually. First of all, the generator has to wait to respond sexually. No intimacy is ever going to work for a generator unless they get to respond to it. Now, by the way, remember, that doesn't mean that if two generators are with each other, that nothing ever happens. You know, when two generators are with each other, 9 times out of 10, they'll have a defined throat between them. One of them will say, I'm really interested in you, whatever the case may be. Are you interested in me? I mean, it's got to go back and forth in order to create response. There has to be response from both ends. But the whole point is that for you, yourself, as a generator, only when you are responding can you enter into any relationship correctly. So first of all, you have to wait to respond. Second, you have to realize something. That relationship is never going to be what you would like it to be when you get into it. You're going to have to work at it. And working at it, by the way, simply means staying with it. The generator that enters into a relationship correctly will go through many, many, many stages in that relationship. It will take time. But generators are the great quitters. I think we have so much trouble in our relationships. All of that goes back to the sacral center. It goes back to generators not entering into relationships correctly. So frustration is the theme in their relationships. I do hundreds and hundreds of relationships analyses, and I get frustrated people. They didn't enter into it correctly, and so they're frustrated. They can't master their relationship because they didn't enter into it correctly. It's a whole thing. And because they're 70% of the population, it means that the vast majority of relationships are nothing but frustration fields. I mean, nothing but frustration. The joy is gone. The beauty is gone. And the work is really work. The work is, I feel awful. This isn't good for me. This isn't working for me. It's the same thing with generator sexuality. They're lousy when they start, It takes time for them to become sexual masters. It takes time for them to be good. It takes time for them to go through these things, cycle after cycle after cycle, level after level after level, until they finally can get to a point of mastery. See, generators are very special. They're the hidden jewel of humanity. And they're most of what humanity is. And what all of us live in the world, in a generative field. That when generators start responding, we have an epidemic of masters. We have an epidemic of people who are alive in their life. We have people that will come to see and find beauty in love, in relationships, in work, in all of those things. And it's not some kind of fuzzy philosophy. It's just a simple mechanic. It's so simple. Don't initiate. Just be here, responding. Just be here. And in being here, if you start a conversation, that's okay if you're a generator. It's all right for you to start a conversation with somebody. But it's not all right for you to make a decision without being asked. It's not all right for you to make a decision without responding. In other words, you're in the movie, you're in the play. But remember, when it comes to the integrity of what you are, everything for you that matters, any decision that you make in your life must be out of response. Then it's perfect. It's perfect. And when a generator is responding, there's no more powerful force in the whole world. It makes manifestors shudder, because there's nothing more incredible than a clear generator that is a master of using its energy. Nothing like that. Nothing. Nothing has the staying power. Nothing has the determination. Nothing has anything like that. That's magic. And it's so easy. It's so easy. Stop, as generators, being fooled by us manifestors, eh? Stop being taken in by the glamour of our doing trip. Remember, we're not here for you, and you're here for each other. See, manifestors are on the outside, eh? We're not here for anybody. We're manifestors. We've been running the show forever, and we think that everybody's incompetent because they can't do. Stop believing manifestors. Stop believing their propaganda. Stop thinking that it's up to you to initiate. Stop thinking that it's up to you to control your life. It's all nonsense. Respond. Life happens. It will look after you, truly. It's the greatest joy in my life because I am helpless and incompetent. Life looks after me and I'm very lucky. It is what it is, and I take it as it is. I live out the nature of being a man, but I have no burden. It does not exist. Take what you've got, the beauty of your life, and work at the experiment of just responding. You change everything. You get the real magic, because the generator is here to dance in the real magic. Just life. Just life. You know, ants never go to conferences. Generators are very complex. Not only are they 70% of the population, but we have two different kinds of generators. Split approximately half and half out of that 70%. So a little over a third of humanity are pure generators, basically what I was just describing. And a little over a third of humanity are manifesting generators. Now, manifesting generators have a harder time. They have a harder time because they are more susceptible to manifestor propaganda than the pure generator. Now, being energy types, they're both susceptible to that propaganda and been ruled by that propaganda. But for the manifesting generator, the pain in trying to be a manifester is much more painful than just being a pure generator trying to be a manifester. They end up suffering not only frustration, but anger on top of that. And because they have a manifesting element to them, they meet an enormous amount of resistance that brings out frustration and anger in them at a deep level. The manifesting generator, because it looks like a manifester, also looks like it can master things right away. And it's not true. They can't. They have the manifesting energy so that they can jump in there and work with something, but they are still generators. And they will still have to go through level after level and stage after stage until they finally reach a point of mastery. For the manifesting generator, it is absolutely essential that they follow their strategy. For these are the real loose cannons in the world. They are dangerous to themselves and they are dangerous to others. They're not clear. And because they're not clear and because they have manifesting capacity, they are the ones who try to live the manifestor's life and they end up being destroyed by it. Their energy is extraordinary. To know a manifesting generator is to know somebody who only stops when they're sleeping if they sleep. And while they're not stopping until they sleep, if they sleep, they're frustrated, annoyed, angry, and in turmoil the whole time they're up, trying to figure out what they should quit and where they should go to after they quit. Endlessly making up their mind about doing this or doing that or being this or being that, and it goes on and on and on. Because they're convinced that they're manifestors, failed manifestors. You know, that's a good name for the manifesting generator, the failed manifester, because that's literally what they are and what they feel like. The moment they respond, this is an energy package beyond belief. And of course, therein lies, like with the pure generator, the only way for them to respond. To respond. To wait to manifest until they respond. To wait to generate until they respond. They must wait. And remember, it's not waiting like you're still and dead, waiting to wake up. Life is going on. And if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, you don't wait anyway. You're busy doing things you like and things you hate. Most of it are things you hate, but you have to be busy. It's going on all the time. Turn off the initiating. Turn on the responding. There's one more criteria. It's the criteria that's there with any type. It is the presence of the defined emotional system. That the emotional generator or the emotional manifesting generator, these are the ones that truly have the hardest time. Because it's painful for them to wait. It's painful to wait. An emotional manifesting generator, can you imagine what that's like for them to wait? I mean, when they get up on their wave or they get down in their wave, they've got the ability to just go out there. They push their energy out there. And they suffer incredibly. When I meet generators that are emotional, I always tell them, play hard to get. Play hard to get. Play hard to get. Play hard to get. Don't just say yes. Don't just say no. Play hard to get. Wait. It's got to come to you again. If you're an emotional generator and somebody wants you, they're going to have to really, really want you. They're going to have to come and you got a hand like this. Nice that you're interested in me. Very nice. I'm busy right now. So you don't know. As the emotional generator, somebody can come up to you who truly can be the best being for you ever in your life. And you're down in your wave. Being down in your wave, if you follow that line and you say, oh, this person's never for me, and you ignore them the rest of the time, it's gone. No decision. It's okay for you to think when you first meet them that they're jerks. Give them a second chance. If they're still jerks, brush them off. But you see, as an emotional being, you'll discover that you're going to have a different perspective as you move along. They go from jerks to gods and back again. I mean, that's what they are. They're jerky gods. I know. I take them in, What to do? But they have to see that within themselves. And remember, it is not a punishment. It is not a handicap to be emotional and have to wait. It isn't. And when it comes to love, the emotional being can actually find out who their partner is. They can really love somebody, but they have to enter into it correctly. Otherwise, they'll quit before they find out who's there. And they have to enter into it correctly as an emotional being because they need to have the perspective in order to see whether anybody has a right to enter into their life. That's their gift, after all, to really assess somebody, to really feel them out, and then to be clear. See, we've got a terrible problem with sex. Sex is emotional. Sex is emotional, and the emotions operate on clarity. So everybody is running around having all these intimate relationships, and they're blind. They don't know what's there. They don't know what's going on. They don't know why they're doing it. And I have met so many people who say, I don't know why I had a child with that person. You can't imagine how many times I've heard that. See, it's just the genes playing with us. The fact is that every relationship in the end almost all of them end up being emotional through the aura, through the program, through connecting, through children. And you have to see that there's no clarity in love. There's only time. Time is the only thing that works. Only time. That we cannot make these moment-by-moment decisions that we love or we hate or we need or we don't need. It's a joke. There's just time. The emotional generator. The emotional master. Think about that. This is the potential of the emotional master. The master that truly sees. Because it is a master that sees everything through the spectrum of light that's possible. That the emotional being sees the darkness and the shit in people and sees the light and their glory in them. That's what it's all about. Without them, we do not know the richness of the other. And unless they wait to respond, they are never going to feel that themselves in their own life, about themselves, about the other. And we're talking about this vast population of generators that dictate what the sexual world is, dictate how we deal with each other. When generators start responding, love starts showing up. It's a very nice thing. In looking at the nature of health and in looking at the sexuality of the generator, remember that it is the generator, because it's such a vast cut of the population, that really has the majority of these problems. And the majority of the problems begin with, and always begin with, not using their energy properly. You can see in this graph that underneath the generator, the question there is, will I be asked? And you see, there is nothing more fearful in the world than generators. They know that they're not manifestors. They know that out of their own frustration whenever they try to manifest. And that whenever I meet a generator and I tell a generator about love, that they have to wait for love to come to them, there's this look in their eyes that I've seen so often. It's that look that says, me? They're going to come and get me? They're going to want me? They've never wanted me. They never came for me. They, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. Or the other side of that, the look in their eye that says, whenever they've come to me, they've been awful and I didn't want them. That's when I really smile inside, The awful ones, the not-self doesn't see who's there for them. Because the not-self doesn't know itself. The whole thing about the nature of health for a generator is that as long as the generator is using its energy in initiating something, as long as the generator is using its energy to do something, that energy is going to work against it. Period. The generator and work. I do many very complex business analyses in which I will have an organization with maybe 15 or 30 employees, and I will take a look at that picture. And that the vast majority of those employees are going to be generators. And it's out of that group of generators that the business has its turnover. Because generators are the great quitters in the world. They're always quitting. Always quitting. I mean, it's a good thing that a generator isn't the sun, because it would just quit. Get tired of going around. I'm bored with this. I quit. No more light. Whoop. Now think about a generator that comes to work for you. And a generator comes to work for you, and you see them in the morning and you say to them, you've got to look after the Evans account. The Evans account is not going to go well. You're telling them what to do. You see, the health of a generator begins with anybody who knows generators, deals with generators, has service for generators, must treat them as generators. The most important thing is when a generator comes to you out of their frustration, initiating out of the not-self, comes to you for a job, help, money, sex, you name it, they come to you. When a generator comes to a doctor, the doctor can't say to the generator, take this medicine and go home. It isn't going to work. It isn't going to help them. And they're going to get even more frustrated. When that generator comes there, you have to say, do you really want to be helped? Do you really want to take the time with this? Do you really want to work with this? Do you really want to be here with me? Do you really want me to help you? They have to be asked. If you don't ask them, you're not going to get their truth. And if you don't ask them, they are not going to respond to you. You have to ask them. And the generator has to understand that they have the most powerful aura on earth. The generator's aura calls you, pulls you, yanks you. And at the moment that the generator stops initiating, they will see they're always attracting something to pull them out. And remember that response isn't about being asked. Being asked is part of it. It's a way that I've used to describe it so people will grasp the concept. But then people get confused and think that that's it. It's not. The generator will respond to the change in the light and the change of the heat and the change of the wind. It'll respond to the change in somebody's look on their face. It'll respond to a sound across the room. It'll respond to anything, but it can't initiate. That's its magic. The bird sings, then the generator can respond, but the generator can't sing to call the bird. It doesn't work. It never works, and then they're frustrated. They sit there doing duck calls, and frustrated that no ducks want them. And all they got to do is wait for a duck to go, and they go, and the duck comes. It's so easy. And I see all these generators walking around doing duck calls. They want to be the initiators because they're afraid that nobody will ask them. They're afraid that life isn't going to ask them. What a joke. Life is asking them all the time. They're the ones that are here to be in tune to the world, to the life force itself, because that's what the sacral is. It is life. Look at the mystics that we have and the teachers that we have in the 20th century. If you look at somebody like Krishnamurti, or you look at Osho or myself, these are people with nothing in their sacral, nothing. It's a fascination with life. It's a fascination with the power of life itself, because that is what the sacral is. It's life. And you see, as long as these beings are trying to initiate, there's no music. There's no love. There's just frustration. I have all these sacral beings who come to me in relationships, and they are frustrated. They're just frustrated with them. It's not that they can't see a love for their partner or this or that or whatever. They're just frustrated because it wasn't correct for them in the first place. So the well-being of a generator is very, very specific. If the generator is responding, they're going to be healthy. When you decide that you're going to take LSD as a generator, look out. You're going to have a horror trip. But if you're a generator and somebody comes up to you and says, would you like to do this? And if you're a pure generator and you're not emotional, so you don't have to wait out your wave, in that moment you can go, or however you respond as a generator, and it will be all right. I know so many people as generators who initiated their drug life. I'm part of a drug culture from the 60s. I watched so many of them get destroyed because it wasn't correct, the entry. And that's about love. That's about work. That's about friendship. That's about everything. 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 No options. No little of this and a little of that. Everything. Generators are here to be the awakened ones. They're here just to vibrate. That's it. And it's not like you need anything other than the gift of your defined sacral to get there. We always think that all of these things are complex or miracles or high states, or this is manifestor propaganda. It's not true. It's not true that if you're a good slave and you obey in this world that you're going to get to heaven. This is manifestor bullshit. And if you live through this life and you do good things, you're going to have the reward of that karma later. Bang! Bullshit. This is all propaganda. This is not true. It's here, now. Now. Now, this is all we have. This is our Maya, our illusion, now. You have to be awake now. There's no reward later. You're not going to sit with the Lamb of God. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's here. It's in you. This is where it all is, always. And you see, if we don't have fun, it's been a lousy ride. It's been a ripoff. Because that's the only thing we can get out of this. We get nothing else. Nothing else. You get death and dust. You get nothing else. This is it. Pay attention now.